Okay, so today we're going to descend deep into the catacombs of Rome, down twisted corridors surrounded by ancient tombs on either side to discover the secret behind the cult of the saints. Much like the catacombs, the history behind the veneration of saints proceeds down many levels into a very deep substratum of traditional Greek and Roman beliefs and rituals connected with death, ancestor worship, and often the misunderstood cult of the heroes. So let's start with the mythology around the catacombs, so often portrayed in popular culture. What's going to happen is, as we go through this talk, I'm going to go ahead and do some myth busting. You'll see an evidential sense of what the catacombs were about. But first, I have to give you the novelistic Hollywood version of it. So let's start, and then I'll go through this bit by bit. And so it goes as follows: Darkness envelops a group of Christian slaves as they descend into the catacombs, a honeycomb of tunnels cut deep into the earth. These secret passageways are both places of burial and refuge. The Christians flee their Roman persecutors, hoping the soldiers will not find them hidden within this labyrinth. In the shadows, they hold secret meetings, practicing their forbidden religion in peace. But is this, I will say, is this an authentic narrative? Evidence from archaeological evidence uh, basically seems to relate a very different story. We're going to be uh, excavating this story, so to speak, as we go through this evening. First of all, while it is true that the catacombs constituted a collection of tunnels twisting and turning their way deep into the earth, their purpose of creation was solely meant at first for burial, not a place of refuge. Now, sometimes people would run down there for refuge, but that's not why it was created. Underground burials were common enough all along the Italian peninsula, all the way back to the first millennia BCE, especially because the Etruscan influence. The Etruscans, they saw the very soft tufa, the lava stone that was easy to cut through, but solidified as it hit the air. And this was a perfect way, a medium to carve honeycombed places of all different sorts. Now, I want to say that the most common subterranean burial places were called columbaria. So columbaria were the first ones that were excavated during the Roman period. These are usually circular chambers punctuated by niches meant to hold the cremated ashes of the departed. Let's take a few look at a few of these here. Let's go to the first image. So what happens is that throughout the early imperial era, hundreds of columbaria flanked each side of the consular highway radiating out from Rome, with about a dozen still extant. Let's take a look at the next one. These mansions of the dead were cut deep into the soft tufa, having mosaic floors and frescoed walls and stuccoed ceilings. They were typically, as I said before, circular, but some were square. Row upon row of half moon niches, known as loculi, were much like the condominiums for the dead, with deceased ashes containing in jars placed within them. Next image. Funerary associations maintained them and were in charge of membership, rules, and distribution of the jars. One joined these funerary clubs in life and they paid their dues ahead of time. In fact, they attended various meetings throughout the year. So you just contributed to putting in money that would later on be connected to your burial. There were special days when members of this club got together. For example, the Parentalia, the Rosalia. the Violacea. These are periods of time where you go out to the columbaria and you have flowers and you have like oil lamps and you pour libations of honey as well as wine. So they're the attendants of these columbaria. Once again, the columbaria date from the well goes back to the tradition goes back to the Etruscan period, but most of these date to the imperial period following the Republic, and they're quite vast. Let's go to another one. Oftentimes, the next image, and sometimes they're beautiful, even in an architectural sense. All this cut out of the deep. Okay, good, good. Now, in time, these chambers became more elaborate, and when inhumation, or inhumation is another word for full body burial, when this became more common, the next natural step was to create underground facilities for these type of burials. So we're now moving from cremated remains to remains of full human bodies. Unlike the Columbaria catacombs, usually featured long, narrow corridors branching out on many different levels. Let's take a look at some of these plans of catacombs. Let's go to the next image. Oh, I like this right here. This identifies some of the locations of the catacombs. Next image. Yeah, they're like this. So imagine an anthill, and you got the idea of a catacomb. Unlike the more well organized columbaria, the catacombs sprawled out and just grew naturally. Let's go to the next image. And so you're looking at this level, but in actuality, these catacombs went two, three, four, five, and even six levels deep of these kind of corridors. So we're looking at just imagine two, three, or four beneath this. Let's go take another look at the ground plan so you get an idea. There you have it, right? In many cases, these catacombs started as chambers, and then from there they enlarged them as the for other members of the family, and they kept excavating, and then eventually, in some cases, the tunneling reached other chambers, and it's almost like dot to dot in some cases. Let's go to the next image. I like this one because it really does demonstrate how crazy it is. You can get into a catacomb and never find your way out. Not all the catacombs of Rome have been fully explored. Many of them are in a weakened condition due to where they're located, especially in areas where there's a high degree of traffic above. And so they're very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it. And the other problem is, much like any kind of mine or cave that is at multiple levels, there's always the worry that one level is going to be crashing into the level below, and so forth. Next image. So, where does the word catacomb come from? While we associate the word catacomb as the early Christian designation for Christian cemetery, let's look at me for a minute, but we'll want to keep this image up soon, which is the same one. The interesting fact is the word cemetery itself was a Christian name for where they placed their dead. Cemetery derives from the Greek verb komeo, which means to sleep, and is meant to demonstrate that they anticipated their bodily resurrection at Christ's second coming. And so they are just merely asleep. So these are sleeping places. Yet, at least for martyrs, Christians believe that the actual day of death was their birth in heaven. And so they call this day their Dies Natalis, or the day of their birth. In contrast, pagans called their cemeteries a necropolis, which literally means city of the dead. But now we must explain where the word catacomb comes from. And surprisingly, the word is connected to a specific place along the Appian Way. So let's now put that same picture up. So proceeding down uh, the Appian Way away from Rome. Let's go to the next, the current image. Yes, that's it. Stay there. After passing the Circus of Maxentius, which you see here, which was built by the Emperor Maxentius, started in the year 306 and finished around 312. And just before the tomb of Cilia Metella, next image, there's the tomb of Cilia Metella. So let's go to the next image. These, by the way, are my photos. See, there's me. Next image, like a large portion. So going down the Appian Way, you can see it is still paved. The one actually I've been here a few times, but the day this picture was taken, there was a nice rain. You could see the cobblestones there. What I love about the Appian Way is how it crisscrosses through the countryside, and there's ruins on each side and these vast fields. So let's go to the next image. There it is. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Next image. So in this area, you're going, what does this have to do with catacombs? Actually, everything. Here we go. There exists a depression in the landscape. This is a natural hollow. Now, in reference to this terrain, next image, locals began to call this area nearby, they called it the Catacombs, which means near the hollow, or near the hollows, near this place where there were quarries. See, the region was made even more hollow as a result of the nearby Pozzolana quarries that provided blocks of tufa for various Roman housing projects. And so you're seeing a remnant here in this area. In the middle of the first century, a small cemetery began to grow near the hollow, most of it pagan in nature, and eventually the burial grounds expanded into the former quarries. In time, Christians began to be buried here, and so the tunneling began. Ancient documents declare that the region about the cemetery was known as Cemeterium Catacumbas as Sanctum Sebastiana via Appia. And so the designation catacomb was applied in relation to the cemetery of Saint Sebastiano. So it was intended for a very specific location. Okay. And so interesting how something that's supposed to be for a specific reason will then be used in a more general sense. So let's go to the next image. And so here we are at San Sebastiano. This is, of course, the church there, and that is where that is, of course, where the catacomb name arrived from, was this particular area, Catacumbas, near the hollows. Oh, you do have a few scholars that say, well, Catacumbas, it could mean at the boats, but it doesn't mean that. So let's jump into this. Let's talk about the catacombs of San Sebastiano. Now, these are early catacombs, as you can see just by its namesake. Let's go to the next image. And you can see here there are, it is near another one known as the Catacomb of San Calestis. So both of them are located in close proximity to one another. So there you have it. The catacomb, next image, the Catacomb of San Sebastiano, as mentioned, was first a quarry. But eventually, burials were added to the site when use for these resources began to diminish. The story goes, is that there was a certain Christian by the name of Callistus, who was a slave of the Emperor Vespasian, who died sometime between 69 to 79 CE, and that the cemetery was connected with this, or at least connected to this individual, at least partly. Around the middle of the second century, the vaults of the quarry were demolished and everything was filled in. And so a small courtyard was created about 9 meters below the pavement of the current church. And so we see here, this is the way into underneath the church. We're going into the catacombs. So let's go to the next image. Hey, we're descending down. It does look like honeycombs. Next image. Ooh. All right, we're going underground. Next image. Here we go. Take a look here. You see three mausoleums. Uh, in a very creative sense, they're called Mausoleum A, Mausoleum B, and Mausoleum C. The first one, Mausoleum A, belongs to Marcus Claudius Hermes. So he is the owner of this one. Let's go to this next image here, and you can see how it looks like from the elevation. Next image. Oh, this is a pretty one. Actually, I didn't take this picture. I took the next one, but I wanted to get the full effect of the fruit. The next one is mine. Sorry. Uh, Next picture. But this is what you see in here. Okay, so you can see that it is decorated. The idea of birds oftentimes are connected to the soul, but it's also the idea is connected to life and abundant life. It's a cheerful kind of place, right? Next image. You have, of course, maybe not completely cheerful because you do have a Medusa. That is obvious there. Next image. You also have a delivery of a funeral oration. So you can see this person's delivering a speech for the deceased. Uh, if you look carefully, you can't see it very well. Uh, there's one of the figures that does represent the deceased person because he does appear in other places. The next image is kind of interesting. Go to the next one. There's also representation of the exposure of the corpse with various lamentations. This is actually, it's hard to see. It's hard to see in person, but this is a corpse of a woman wearing green, and she's laid on a briar of wooden trestles. So she is ready for burial. So there's something that is going on in an official sense. Okay, so let's go to the next image. There we go. And so once again, you have some kind of greeting going on here. What's happening here is that Mausoleum A belonged to Marcus Claudius Hermes, with the facade is still there. Mausoleum B was connected to certain Elpidius, who was an imperial slave, and there's possibly others. There's also, by the way, an Ichthus here. And Mausoleum C is unidentified. Some will say that it is, uh, this is when the Christian usage began, especially during the reign of Septimius Severus. Now, what will happen is that let's look at my face for a little bit. There is a small cemetery located in the plaza that continues in usage throughout the early to the mid part of the third century, especially around Mausoleum B. And altogether, then there is another construction, a triclea, a special chamber is created. And I want to tease you here. There is something that's pretty remarkable about this chamber. I mean, really important. And you'll have to wait towards the middle of the talk to get there. But they build this special chamber for some reason, which we'll talk about what it's for. And then by the fourth century, it starts to grow and to expand. Um, uh, the next image here. Of course, you're going to have the crypt of San Sebastiano is located here. Next image. As explained in a work known as the Paseo of the 5th century, it is said to be near the remains of the apostles, this particular place. Uh, Now, Saint Sebastian, next image. He lived between 255 to 288. He was said to have been martyred during the persecutions of Diocletian, where he was led to a field, next image, bound to a stake, next image, and shot full of arrows. And you can see here, this is a representation of him at this particular tomb there, and you do have a few dedications. Let's do a couple more pictures, and we're going to move to the next There we go. Next image. All right, let's move on to the catacombs of Calixtus. I want to give you an idea of a few of the catacombs, and then from there, we're going to go into the iconography and what they really mean. Next image. The catacombs of Calixtus. We're on our way there. Perfect. Love it. It was a rainy day for that. Now, what happens is that the site next, yeah, the site started about an open air cemetery connecting to the Cecilia family from the second century. Now, Saint Cecilia, she's a martyr, a very famous martyr, and during the reign of Marcus Aurelius between 176 to 180. And at this time, there was an underground chamber for a burial that's called the Crypt of Lucina. Let's go to the next image. So we're gonna go to the next image there, and we're waiting in line to go into this catacomb. Next image, Lucina. There's a remnant there of the earlier pagan section. Next image. So Lucina, there you can see the crypt or crypts of Lucina. She was said to be a noblewoman who facilitated the burial of a certain pope, Saint Cornelius, who presided from March 251 to 253 when he was martyred. With that said, the structure of this chamber does indeed go back to the second century. Next image. So here's some images of it. The catacombs here are named after Pope Calixtus. Next image. And you can see that this particular chamber here of Lucia, you can see here that here we have the representations of the four seasons. Next image. And you have a representation of the Good Shepherd as well. Next image. And here we go. So the catacombs are named after Pope Calixtus. He reigned between 217 to 222. He was the guardian, the first known guardian of these burial places. He was designated to be in charge of these places by the previous pope by the name of Zephyrinus. Zephyrinus was in charge between 199 to 217. And so between 199 and 217, you have somebody who is officially designated to be in charge of these particular cemeteries, and in this case, these catacombs. And so we know that sometime during the reign of Septimius Severus, this comes about. Calixtus, so therefore, was appointed as a deacon, an overseer over those who are known as the diggers, or the fastores, and was to make sure all Christians had proper burials without exceptions. All this was financed through church offerings so that even the poor were paid for. As we just saw, we saw an image of the Good Shepherd. Okay, so what will happen here is that we have the image of the Good Shepherd, and you can see it right here, the image of the Good Shepherd. And nearby is the image, this image. Who's this? This is an image of Orpheus. So we see in the vaulted ceiling, Orpheus is seated upon a rock. So Orpheus was a Greek musician. He's a poet that is connected with the Orphic mysteries. And he was also seen and understood as a shepherd figure, much like Christ. And so it is interesting that we're going to see the Good Shepherd and Orpheus in close proximity to one another. This is not the only time that you're going to see this in the catacombs. You're going to see this at other times as well. You also see graffiti everywhere, especially by the entrance, where you see this capital PRB, which stands for presbyter or priest. And you also see the words ignitus peccator, which means unworthy sinner. That's written everywhere, and these priests are writing this down, seeing themselves as not clear, right? Let's go to the next image. I think we have an image of the graffiti. So let's see here. Oh, okay. Oh, so it's reversed order. Okay, so the order's reversed itself. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so here's Orpheus there. There's the graffiti. All right. Okay, good, good. Okay, let's go to the next image. Oh, okay. So this is the crypt of the popes. Six popes are buried here, and we found inscriptions for at least five of them. Let's go. Let's see the inscriptions. First of all, for next image, you have Pontianus, who was Bishop of Rome from 230 to 235. Let's go to the next one. The next one is next image. Next one is Antheris. He was Pope from 235 to 236. Go to the next image. The next Pope was a certain, oh, okay, well, I guess Fabian, 236 to 250. Next image. And the next one is Lucius, 253 to 254. And finally, the next one is Eutychius, 275 to 283. So this is the burial place of these popes in the middle part of the 200s. Nearby, there's also the tomb of Sextus II, who was pope from 257 to 258. Let's go to the next image. And we find here, oh, okay, well, this is the grave of Saint Cecilia, as we talked about before. So this is where she's at. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so we find here that there's a poem that is written by the Pope Damasius in Latin hexameters. He was this Pope reigned from 366 to 384. And he was the one who encouraged the creation of the Vulgate Bible that will be translated by Jerome. He was so he's very important in many ways. So he writes a special dedication here that is on a plaque, and it says, "If you are searching for them, here lies united an army of saints. These venerable tombs enclose their bodies, while the kingdom of heaven has already welcomed their souls. Here lie the companions of Sextus, who bear the trophies won from the enemy. Here lie the brotherhood of popes who guard the altar of Christ. Here the bishop who lived through a long peace. Here the holy confessors sent to us from grace. Here young men and children, the elderly and their chaste offerings, who desire to conserve their virginity. Here too I, Damasus, confess I would like to be buried, were it not for the fear of disturbing the ashes of these holy persons." Okay. I do want to talk about this. So let's see my face a little bit, and I want to bring some illumination to this point. What does he mean? What's going on here? He's not sure. He doesn't want to disturb. There was a problem. And this problem happened during the 4th century. And first of all, we have to understand how catacombs work. So first of all, you have the oldest catacomb will be at the top. I know it sounds strange, but think about it. It'll be at the top. And then what happens is the newer catacombs will be excavated further and further down. So as you go further down, you get to the newer ones because they keep on digging. Well, there's a problem there. The problem is that people want to be at the top level where all the cool martyrs, the saints are all located, and so there was this tendency of overturning people who are buried at the top so they could be buried at the top, not down in level 4 or level 5. And so this is going on. So Davis is saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do it. He would like to be buried there, but he's trying to act like he's humble, saying, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do what others have done, which, by the way, we'll talk about that more. Okay, let's go to the next one. He did write another poem. I just want you to understand what he meant by that last comment. And it's kind of a warning, too. Okay, so he says, at the time, this is another inscription located here. He says, at the time when the sword, persecution, pierced the bowels of the mother church, I now buried here, taught as a pastor pope. Look, he got buried there. As a pastor pope, the word of God, the divine precepts. when suddenly the soldiers rushed in, dragged me from the episcopal chair. The faithful offered their necks to the sword. But as soon as the pastor saw the ones who wished to rob him of the palm of martyrdom, he was the first to offer himself and his own head, not tolerating that the pagan frenzy should harm the others. Christ, who gives recompense, made manifest the pastor's merit, preserving unharmed the flock. Actually, this is not him. He's the one who wrote it, though. He likes his poetry, Damasus does, but he was not buried here as much as he wanted to be buried there. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more little pieces. That's good. Next image. So we have here a great image of of Jesus as Pantocrator, as the creator of the world. That dates from very much later, the 8th or 9th centuries. And the next image. We also have here the frescoes of the martyrs, Polycamus, Sebastian, and Quirinius. This is from the 5th century. So we can see the dates for this one. Okay, so let's take a look at a few more, and then we're going to just overview a few other catacombs. Oh, look at this. Yeah, all right. Sure, we'll talk about this. So this is an image in a catacombs of John the Baptist baptizing Jesus, and then you see right there off to the side, you see a fisherman. And so this is a very early image that goes back to the 3rd century. Next image. Here is a representation of the feeding, supposedly of the 5,000. That's the interpretation. To me, I think it looks just like a regular Eucharist, but you do have the fish there, and the loaves it's kind of gone. It's torn out on the side. Next image. And here you have a great image of Jonah being kind of thrown off. He is being thrown into where, well, this is the whale. It looks more like a sea monster. Actually, kind of looks like a seahorse, or is it just me? I don't know. But something is going on there. Next image. And here is an image of the woman at the well. So once again, the Samaritan woman at the well, and Jesus is fetching this living water. So that's pretty cool. Next image. And this is an Orontes figure. This is a female, this is a woman who is praying with her hands upraised. We'll talk about the phenomenology in just a little bit. Next image. So these catacombs continue on. And so they're quite large. And you can see there's the room for the 4 seasons. Let's go to the next image. This, yeah, we're aware of this is. This is a phoenix. So the phoenix will be used for the idea of regeneration. That it is said that when you resurrect, you will be as a phoenix rising from the ashes. You will be better than you were before. And so that's one interpretation. Or maybe one of the artisans just like wanting to draw a little phoenix there with this little, that's kind of glowing there. Next image. And here, of course, ere or peace, and have here a representation of the dove, which connects to the idea of the Holy Spirit. And look, it's a female again with her arms raised up. Of course, the word orans means to pray in Latin, orante. So another orante symbol that we're going to have fun unpacking in a little bit. Next image. And then you have this great image. Next image. This actually is a sarcophagus of a child right here. But you can see here, take a look. Very traditional pagan in many different ways, especially the top layer. You have the apotropaic images. You have angels, but these angels are a little different, aren't they? So it harkens unto also those who are connected to nymphs, who are connected to these other kinds of creatures that come from paganism. So it's not quite fully a Christian idea. Of course, you do have Daniel, and there's some lions there, so he looks like he's in some trouble there. And you do have, looks like some form of resurrection, perhaps, perhaps not. Next image. And this is one of the few final images of this area. You can see again, they're pretty diverse, different colored rocks, oxidization, everything kind of changes things. And of course, the frescoes are peeling off. Next image. Here's another image from there. I didn't realize I had this one in there. That's good. Yeah. So next image, take a look at the frescoed ceilings. Okay. Oh, all right. And it continues. I want you. The reason why I included this, I want you to get the idea. This is more. These this complex goes on for miles. Next image. You can get perpetually lost, and inscriptions are everywhere. Dedications. So much of what we get from the catacombs arrive directly from the catacombs. They say so much. Would like to go break down this for you, but time is of essence. Next image. I like this one right here. You can see here you do have more orate symbols, more people with their hands risen. Let's go look at the next image. This is what it would be after it's reconstructed. You know, if you reconstruct this, this is kind of what it would look like. Here, you can't see it, but part of the Good Shepherd is there above. Unfortunately, the grave that is there, they took out the rest of this particular fresco. But you have this idea of, again, Jesus understood as the Good Shepherd. And you have here Moses knocking the rock. You can see the hand of God there, but knocking the rock, and so of course he gets in trouble for this. Next image. And some of these rooms are pretty huge. This actually has an enormous dome above. Next image. This one is interesting. This one has, well, let's look at the next image. It's hard to see, so let's take a look at this. Is an early image of Mary with Jesus, and here you have those who are the wise men, the magi, appearing before him. So you have that. Okay. Next image. Right here, you have this is again connected. You have an image of this person who is now deceased. Next image. And of course, a few more. You see the dove above. Next image. This is an idea of this particular complex. This is more clear. And so you see the idea once again. This is of course Jesus. Now the interpretations are obviously this is John the Baptist. He's baptizing Jesus, and you're seeing the dove of the Holy Spirit that is descending from above. Next image. Okay, so let's take a look at a few others. Okay, so there's also beyond those two, you have the Catacomb of Domitilla. This is just west. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. That is the just west of the Catacomb of San Sebastiano and southwest of San Callisto. Here, of course, this particular one is along. It's about 4 levels. They found it houses about 15,000 bodies. It does have an underground basilica that was built in the 4th century, but it is separate from the rest. Is built on property that's owned by Flavia Domitia, who is the granddaughter of the Emperor Vespasian and the niece of Titus. Uh, Basically, she was exiled during the reign of Domitian to the island of Pontia in consequence of the testimony born of Christ. And so, what happens here is the idea that you have those who are within the imperial household during the time of Domitian that convert over to Christianity. And so there's a connection here with this legacy. You can see here, this is an interesting image. Again, the Good Shepherd. And apparently this could be Jesus. It may be. Next image. And you see here, of course, once again, Jesus with disciples. I like the fact that they're all wearing togas, right? So they're all properly dressed. Next image. All right, and here we have, of course, another image radiating out. Once again, the canopies are so often decorated. Next image. Yeah, there goes another image from the same catacombs of Domitia. Next one. And you have here a image of the Last Supper. Next image. All right. This is Orpheus. So once again, Believe it or not, the image of the Good Shepherd is in close proximity to Orpheus again, which I find is fascinating. So once again, these two images are being placed together. Why are these images are being placed together? There is a well, they're wanting those who are new Christians to see Jesus as a new Orpheus, but not with the really bad end, with the floating head. But the idea would be that there is a possibility of a resurrection, a bodily resurrection, or coming from Hades, I should say, and being able to return. And so you could see that here. Next image. What this is a nice image of Orontes figure. Good. Once again, these are women, prominent women who are Christians and Christian. It looks like they're Christian leaders. We see a lot of that within these catacombs, which is oftentimes very controversial to the church today. Next image. All right. So now we're at another catacomb. This catacomb is the catacomb that is known as the Prestitatio, also known as Praetextatus. Say that three times fast. This one's located just east of the catacombs of Callisto, and it was on the site of a very large residence of Herod Atticus. You have, of course, it was started in an abandoned cistern. That's where the catacombs started. And let's take a look at here. We have a few different things here. And once again, next image. And you have the Good Shepherd again, surrounded by nature. What is interesting here is this is perceived to be connected to Jesus, but I want you again to look at this, and this Good Shepherd appears to have very much a pagan past that is still deeply rooted to it. Next image. I do like quite a bit the frescoes of this particular catacomb with its natural scenes and vine work and so forth. Next image. Yes, this is beautiful. This is now moving on. This is the catacomb of, actually, this is still the catacomb of Praxiteles. Next one. I love this one, though. Here it is. This is the catacomb of Via Latina. This is also known as the catacomb of Apronicus. It has 4 levels. It was used in the 4th century. It does blend pagan and Christian imagery. Next, this is Jacob's ladder. Okay, here we go. Next image. So you're in for a treat here. This is hardly ever talked about. What we have here is what is known as the Hercules cycle. So we have the images connected to the life of Hercules. This first one is connected. This right here is Admetus, who reclines, and he's on his deathbed with his family leaning over him. It is not in a very good state of preservation. Alcestis is there at his side with arms extended as if in supplication for the life of her husband. Her husband is dying. The next image has Hercules and Minerva clasping hands. This is the hero's choice of virtue over vice. So Hercules now enters into the scene. Next image, like a comic book. You have Hercules standing over the slain enemy. Some people say it's Cacus. Other people say that this is a representation that Hercules triumphs over death itself. Next image. Here we have a Hercules rescuing Alcestis from the underworld and reuniting her with her husband. So Hercules goes to the underworld to rescue the wife and bring her back to her husband. So you can see the meaning behind this imagery. Next image. You also have Hercules killing the Hydra of Lerna. And the next one, Hercules stealing the gold apples of Hesperides. But here it is that Hercules is guised in the role of a savior. This is mostly a Christian burial area that was heavily used during the 300 CE. And so Hercules must indeed have a Christian allegorical significance. What is that? Well, it does have a very strong pagan eschatology. But the idea is that you are to see that Jesus is the new Hercules. In the ancient world, they saw Hercules as a hero. Hercules as the hero, you believe in Hercules, and he, in many ways, intercedes because he's half God and half man. He intercedes between humanity and the gods beyond. He's the intercessor. And so this artist is bringing the person in and saying, hey, Jesus is also like Hercules. And so this is an appeal to the popular culture of that time. It's a reaching out so they would understand the context of who Jesus is through using a pagan illustration. And we do know that there's a connection with next images. Next image. In the same style, then we're going to see Moses parting the Red Sea. And next image. It's missing. Christ resurrecting Lazarus. This is actually Jonah just in consternation, sitting there waiting for Nineveh to do its thing. Let's go to the next image. Maybe it's the next one. Oh, okay, it's not. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so what's going to happen here is that I'm going to go ahead because this is the last picture image, and I'll go ahead and take this down, and we'll go from here. Okay, so here we go. So we have here an image. I think we can see this. Can we see this or not? Is this a? Is that is can you see this at all? Let's see here. Oh man, this is not going to work, is it? Okay. So what's going to happen is we have an image of Jesus who is bringing back Lazarus to life. So what will happen is there's an artistic continuity. And so the idea is that you go through the Hercules cycle, you understand and you believe, or understand at least, who Hercules is, and then when you go into the next chamber, it's kind of like bait and switch. It's like, oh wait, all of a sudden it's like, so now you're seeing illustrations of Moses. But you're also seeing who's parting the Red Sea. What that means, the significance is it has this idea of freedom of the Israelites from bondage of Egypt. In many cases, in ancient days, the release from Egypt is also looked at as the release from this world into the next. So that's kind of the allegory going on there. So well, you're going to see also now the image of Jesus resurrecting Lazarus, and here again is the idea that you could be brought back, just like Hercules brought back that wife to her husband, so Jesus can bring us back to just much like Lazarus. So this idea flows right in to the other. I wish I could show you some of these other pictures but we'll go on from there. And let's see here. So we also have the catacombs of Comadia. I want to mention this place right here, and this, of course, is along the Via Ostia. It's from the 4th century. It has 3 levels. There is another catacomb of Marcelino and Peter. Was interesting here, and I have pictures here, but what happens is between 2004 to 2010, they found excavated 20,000 skeletons. So 20,000 skeletons were discovered. So this was one of those undisturbed catacombs that didn't take out the loculi like some of the others. You have also the catacombs of Priscilla, where you see various frescoes of biblical scenes. One important fresco, and once again, this will probably never work in 1,000 years, but give it the old college try. Yeah, you get. Okay, it's working. Is this image? You get the idea here. This is good. This is working. What does this represent? Well, this represents the three stages of a woman's life. The first image is you have the veil, the veiling, the bishop veils a consecrated virgin on the right. Can you see it all? There it is. Then the second one has her now praying. And the third has her in the position of being a mother. And so these are the three stages there. Famous bishop that is buried in this place, of course, is Pope Marcellinus. So that is connected to that. Okay. The most common tombs in the catacombs were called loculi. Euculi. Basically, these are rectangular shaped niches cut in tiers, and once the body was interred, covered over with a marble slab or tile and sealed with lime. Because the niche was directly closed up, the early Christians felt little need for any other container for the body. So the deceased were simply wrapped in a shroud and deposited in the cramped space. Their bodies were often drenched in strong perfumes to cover the pungent odors of decomposition, but sometimes they wished to accelerate the rate of decay so that their loved ones could quickly transform into the venerable bones as opposed to lingering as festering corpses. So they sprinkled lime over the body to hurry nature along. Round holes directly next to the loculi were intended to hold special funerary terracotta lamps in their memory, much of the same manner as we place flowers by graves today. There is also that which is called a arcosolium. Arcosolium were more elaborate tombs having niches covered by arches and typically located in small rooms called cubiculi. They typically had a square or polygonal floor plan with a vaulted roof above and were set aside for family burials or for special trade guilds. Every space of the catacombs were typically filled from floor to ceiling before expanding to new tunnels, and sometimes stacked loculi 4 levels high on each side. I had illustrations of that. Even the narrow spaces were designated for burial. For while a full-sized adult may not be able to occupy the narrow areas about junctures, the graves of infants could. And so the honeycomb of infant burials at these junctures happens to be a testimony of the high infant mortality rates at that time. The second century Christian father Tertullian notes that Christians were in the habit of collecting the bodies of newly born left dead or for dead upon various rubbish heaps and giving these babies proper burials out of Christian charity. So not all the infants were of the Christian dead. And so once again, these corners facilitated that. But we're still kind of talking about the legend. So we talked about the fact, we covered the idea that the catacombs, right? That, well, that they were not truly unique to only Christianity. And they were essentially intended to be places of burial. There's a few other kinds of activities that went on, but it's not meant for refuge. Sometimes by accident, people would go there, but not too often. And we'll go there in a little bit. Second, the catacombs were not merely burial places for those who believed in Christianity. Let's go here a little bit. For there existed Jewish and Christian catacombs as well. In fact, 3 Jewish catacombs alone were discovered near the famous catacombs of St. Calixtus along the Appian Way. Originally, there were 6 catacombs, Jewish catacombs, but only 2 are left. Most of the pagan burials and catacombs date from the earlier periods in the development of this form of burial, mostly from the 1st and 2nd centuries, but we have to realize that there are pagans buried amongst with Christians. As Christianity spread, the pagan presence in these complexes became less frequent. Still, it is often difficult for archaeologists to determine the identity over whether some of the artwork is Christian or pagan. especially scenes depicting banquets or weddings. As we mentioned before, the two most dominant Christian images found in the catacombs are that of the Good Shepherd, representing Christ, but also the Orontes figure, which has a very interesting context. Third, the catacombs were rarely used for Christian gatherings. There is only, well, they say one, but there's actually two catacombs that have a connecting basilica that happen to be underground. But for the most part, and a nice ways away, for the most part, they didn't gather and meet there because the Romans knew these catacombs. So on the infrequent occasions when they did meet in these catacombs, it was usually reserved for honoring the martyrs. Now, the incredible stench of so many rotting corpses, even with proper ventilation, would have been unbearable, if not poisonous, over long periods of time. You got to remember, we're having a lot of burials here, and all you have is you have the body placed on in these niches, and they're just kind of plastered over, right? And then yeah, you get the point. So, but as mentioned, we do find some evidence for less frequent small gatherings in certain rooms that reserved for saints and popes. For instance, within the catacombs um, of St. Callisto, the crypt of popes, as we know, located within the rectangular hall, reveal the remnants of an altar. This demonstrates that some gathered here for some kind of liturgical purpose. Finally, the Christians who did frequent the catacombs were both free and slave, rich and poor. It must be remembered that many catacombs were excavated upon land that was owned by wealthy converts to Christianity, and they were providing burial places for both themselves and their poor brethren. Many of these catacombs still bear their names: Domitella, Praxiteles, Lucian, etc. The catacombs were also administered by specially selected deacons. And we talked about the earliest one that we know of, and that's Calixtus, appointed during the term of Pope Zephyrinus in the late second century, 199. So, why did Christians so completely adopt the practice of inhumation, which we know now as bodily burial, within these deep and dark tunnels below the ground, even over their pagan and Jewish neighbors, most notably in the regions about Rome, Naples, Syracuse, Malta, Tunis, and Alexandria? Why? The first reason we discussed earlier, and that is the Christians' particular devotion to the custom of bodily burial as opposed to cremation, because they wished to emulate the way Jesus was buried, having the expectation that they too would be resurrected in the very same manner. The second reason is directly connected to Christian ethics of charity, especially taking care of those in need and the poor, believing the responsibility continued even after one died by providing a proper burial for all within their community. This, of course, was a natural, right? In this spirit, those Christians with more means provided for Christians who did not, even Christian slaves, donating or purchasing land for their community, and even taking care of all the costs for the specific burials if need be. A third reason involves the Christian sense of community, of wishing to not only take care of one's own, but to be together collectively in death as they were in life, all waiting together the day when their physical bodies would arise again to join Christ at the second coming. Being in close proximity also helped facilitate easy administration or overseership and maintenance by Christian families, as well as enabling more concentrated community acts such as group prayers and the veneration of martyr sites. And this is, of course, these martyr sites are sprinkled amongst the tunnels. Fourth, in an age where Christians were experiencing severe persecutions, which sometimes included the desecration of their graves, as we learn from Roman primary sources at that time, the catacombs offered a bit of security from the onslaught, While arguably not invulnerable to hostile acts by the Roman populace and administrators alike, the fact that the catacombs were not so apparently visible did give credence to that out of sight, out of mind mentality, and so guaranteed some kind of protection. While for the most of the first 3 centuries, the Roman government was openly tolerant of all sort of religious expressions, including Christianity, certain aspects of the belief system seem to confront imperial accusations uh, that they are, well, maybe not being good citizens. They're not following the order of society, as well as the following what is they believe as the nature of the universe. One of the problems is that it was customary to deify the emperor after their death. And in the cases of those who were the heirs, both natural as well as adopted, they were declared as the Son of God. This was said on inscriptions throughout the empire. You can imagine how a Jewish upstart from the troublesome province of Palestine, proclaiming the arrival of a new kingdom, and the fact that this man was both viewed and worshiped as the Son of God and a king, stirred Roman imaginations. For instance, Pliny the Younger, in the first part of the 2nd century, viewed Christians as forming an almost political party, and that was believed very dangerous by many of his contemporaries, while his friend Tacitus simply saw them as depraved and hating the human race. Christian codes of ethics had effectively removed Christians from public life because of the very evidence of pagan associations to virtually every public activity, from theaters and stadiums to public baths and civic events and festivals. Naturally, once you leave the limelight, all sorts of ideas begin to emerge, especially if you're now hiding in various gatherings behind closed doors. Christians were not only viewed as impious because they refused to sprinkle incense before the image of the emperor, a kind of an ancient equivalent to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, but because of misconceptions of how they saw themselves as a family, calling one another brothers and sisters, which of course that person's not her brother, not sister, and so this is looked at as incest. Furthermore, the Eucharist was misunderstood, and so the idea of drinking the blood and eating of the flesh was viewed as cannibalism. Finally, Christians preached that everyone, including slaves, were children of God, equal before the eyes of God, and many slaves assumed the position of leadership. Hence, Christianity was also upset the social status, the whole structure, the hierarchy of Roman society. As a result of all these reasons, certain emperors sought out to suppress Christianity. Often the attempts were focused upon destroying Christian leadership rather than focusing upon everyone in general. Bishops, presbyters, and deacons in particular had to beware of possible danger, especially after the reign of a very good emperor by the name of Severus Alexander in 235. After that, there was a series of emperors seeing that they were losing many of the battles against the barbarians, and they believed that the reason for their defeats, was due to the fact that the Romans were no longer praying to the very gods that once made them victorious. And who was at fault? Who was the scapegoat? The Christians, of course. Now, Christian martyrs were created on a regular basis, while the catacombs proved to be safe most of the time for the Christian dead. On a few occasions, even the emperors ordered troops into the catacombs to desecrate them. For instance, I'll give you a year. In 258, the Emperor Valerian made it against the law to enter the catacombs for prayer meetings until his death in 260. The Emperor Diocletian also seized and sealed off the Christian catacombs from the years 303 to 309. Still, there are exceptions rather than the rule, And for the most of the time, the Christian dead in the catacombs were left alone and safe deep in the underground, but not always. So it's not really a good refuge if the Romans kind of go in. Fifth, another reason, land was a limited resource even in Roman times, and grave space was severely prescribed. For instance, no one was permitted to be buried within the walls of any Roman city, but had to be buried outside of the sacred Pomerium. Yet this land was often taken up by both small and large farms. Furthermore, for reasons of accessibility, the burial areas were often located along the roads leaving the town or the city. Even though Rome had plenty of roads radiating from it, the city's passing population quickly dominated both sides of the road. Another factor is while cremation takes up little space and the vessel containing their ashes could be perched up upon a very small niche along the very deep columbaria, inhumation takes up much more space and it is not as economically prudent when land comes at such a high price. The irony is that while so many of the Christians were very poor, they favored a form of burial that could be far more expensive because of their religious beliefs. In light of the problem, the best solution was to use the land vertically rather than horizontally, to excavate deep within the ground, burrowing down below after consecutive level to maximize space. The first floor was usually tunneled between 3 to 8 meters below the surface, with the second about 10 to 15 meters down, followed by the third about 20 meters down, and so on, sometimes going as far down as 30 meters or deeper. Typically, however, most catacombs are between 4 to 5 levels deep, with many split levels here and there. As I mentioned before, the oldest burials were closest to the surface, with the newer ones further and further down below the surface. But the problem is that these very first burials were often the graves of the most venerated martyrs who lived during the age of persecutions, and the ones who gave their lives in the most heroic ways. For instance, the catacombs of St. Calixtus began near the martyr's shrine that was dedicated to the young Tarquinius, who was beaten and killed on his way to give the communion bread to some Christians in prison by a local gang determined to take his bread for themselves. Rather than hand over the consecrated body of Christ, he chose to die defending it. Early Christians liked to be buried near such heroes of the faith, and those near their bodies were considered all the more blessed. The closer you are, the more blessed you are. So the demand for this land was quite high, as we mentioned before. And soon, more tunnels were excavated outward from these first levels. First extensions from the first levels continued with the second extensions, and then space truly ran out from nearby. The demand for these first levels became so intense that by the mid part of the 4th century, the now more corruptible guild of catacomb diggers, known as fossors, because of the age of peace, you know, what they decided to do is that they're going to break open the sealed loculi, move the older skeletons to different locations, and place the new bodies in their place with new dedications. For instance, for the catacomb of Calixtus, the bones of those removed from the first loculi to accommodate the newcomers were transferred to the third floor below near the crypt of St. Cecilia. And they were all placed in the sand pit. Archaeologists found as many as 14 layers of bones here. So corruption, organizational corruption, even amongst the gravediggers, becomes a problem during the age of peace. Right? It's all about it's all about who can pay, what to whom, and for how much to get what they need. Right? With that said, This was not the custom of the age before Constantine, and no reflection of early Christian ethos of the first few centuries. This came about later, when Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. Church and state come together, and a lot of corruption ensues. Now, the story of discovery is not over yet. Many of the catacombs have not been fully explored. Still others remain lost, despite the fact that we know of their existence and general locations. For example, we have a lost catacomb known as St. Felice, the lost catacomb of Tertulliano, Martiano, and others too. So we have lost catacombs that could be discovered sometime. Perhaps even someone hearing this lecture will go out and make the discovery. Who knows, right? One of the most daunting of archaeological challenges is when it comes to the examination of early Christianity uh, in connection to understanding its symbols. There's a plethora of symbols discovered at these ancient sites. For we have often lost the direct context for these images and have to rely upon what we can glean from contemporary writings, both Christian and pagan, as well, of course, as doing comparative work in relation to other similar images uncovered from the surrounding Greco-Roman culture. And with any symbol of a religious nature, there exists numerous levels of possible interpretation, including a direct, obvious meaning, often meant for the general believer, and an indirect, arcane meaning intended for the initiate or those who have advanced or more privileged knowledge. Yet, in particular with Christian symbols, because of the general persecutions in the first centuries, there is also a third possible course. Because of the general persecutions in the first centuries, uh, the symbol could be intended to fool the outsider into a completely different interpretation and thereby passing the status quo unscathed. Naturally, in this presentation today, I cannot go over all the images, but I do offer here a sampling of the most important images to arrive from the first 3 centuries of Christianity. After reviewing these, I have determined to discuss specifically the symbols with a nautical theme, including that of the anchor, the boat, and the fish, as well as the symbol of the dove and the image of the Good Shepherd and the Orontes image. One of the most frequent of very first Christian symbols is the image of the anchor. And while it is prevalent in the first centuries of Christianity, the anchor is very prevalent. As soon as Christianity becomes legitimized after the Edict of Milan in 313 CE by Constantine, the, the anchor disappears altogether, along with the image of the boat. And so there's an association that has a close correlation to the times of persecution, and likewise may have multiple possible interpretations. Without question, the anchor symbol is uncovered everywhere, inscribed by the names of the Christian deceased and throughout the catacombs, standing alone or with the fish symbol. In fact, there are as many as 70 images of the anchor in the catacombs of Priscilla in Rome alone. By examining the New Testament, we do find a reference to the importance of the anchor in Hebrews 6:19, where it is associated with God's promise. In the 2nd century, Clement of Alexandria mentions the anchor as one of the acceptable symbols of Christians. Some scholars have noticed that at the very time the anchor disappears from the epigraphic records, the symbol of the cross does appear, and have often appealed to the idea that the anchor is simply a disguised cross. When perusing through the New Testament, you encounter much imagery utilizing the boat. You have Jesus being pushed by the crowds to such an extent that he has to stand in the boat to preach his message. You have the episode when Jesus asks his disciples to cast their nets onto the other side of their boats in response to their complaints that they had caught no fish any day, all day long. Of course, when they do so, the nets are full. They have to cut them in order to get them out. And you have the epic moment when Jesus stills the water during the turbulent storm in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. In this story, as Jesus was sleeping, a storm suddenly rises up and threatens the boat, and all aboard with watery death. The disciples panicking, they believed that they would all die, but the lesson is that they really had nothing to fear because Jesus was on the boat with them. When they shake Jesus awake after complaining about their lack of faith, Jesus stands up and stops the tempest, revealing him as even connected to the forces of nature itself. It is the latter story that seems to apply to this particular Christian imagery. The boat, like the anchor, was heavily employed during times of persecution and suddenly disappears when the Constantinian peace occurs, demonstrating a connection with the times of turmoil and uncertainty. The idea is that even during these times, as long as we are in Christ's boat, there is nothing to worry about. He has control over even the forces of nature, and one's faith should rest in him alone. Unlike the imagery of the boat within pagan contexts, the boat does not represent the passage of the soul, but security during times of anxiety. Most people, even today, recognize the Christian fish. And how can we not? It's everywhere, especially in the back bumpers of various cars. Although I must say it was more popular during the 1970s and 1980s, right? It may come as no surprise that the fish was a primary symbol in the first centuries of the Christian era. And of course, you notice that this is yet another nautical sign. The saying, like a fish out of water, may not be too far away from the first meanings for the fish, since it indeed stood for being not of this world, of being out of one's element and far away from home. The interpretation of home, of course, as the heavenly kingdom, right? So the second meaning can be gleaned from the second century. Clement of Alexandria, in his discussion on Christian seals in general, states as follows. He says, let our seals be the dove or the fish, or a ship sailing before the fair wind, or the lyre for music, which seals Polycrates used, or a ship's anchor, which Seleucus carved on his device. And if there be a fisherman, he will recall an apostle and children drawn from the water. Quotation. Here you will note the prevalence of nautical signs, but also the idea when attached to the fisherman image that the fish represents the Christian as drawn from the water of this dark and hostile world. Jesus once spoke about the change of fishermen's disciples' vocation from fishers of fish to fishers of men. But the idea is still retained from the new saved Christians. They're still a fish. Another prevalent context for the fish symbol is within the images of the Christian communal meal. In 99% of all early representations of the Christian meal uh, found in the catacombs, on the frescoes, the fish happens to be on the plate before everyone. Sometimes bread accompanies the fish and even wine. The fish in this context goes back to the story of the feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospels. Here, Jesus is portrayed as miraculously multiplying the fish and bread to feed his hungry followers. This epic communal meal revealed Christ's care for those in need and his control over the bounty of nature. Yet, with the communal meal, often seen as the agape feast, the fish becomes more than simply a symbol of community love and sharing. In the late third or early fourth century epitaph of a certain Christian Albercius from Asia Minor, Jesus also becomes associated with the fish. Jesus is the fish? Ah, now we're going somewhere. The inscription reads, food, the fish from the fountain, the very great, the pure, which the Holy Virgin seized. Here, the fountain refers to the one who offers the living water and is typically associated with Jesus in ancient Christian sources. Later on, Paulinus of Nola, writing in 396, makes a direct connection within the communal meals context. And she states as follows. So she states, I see the congregated people so arranged in order on couches and also filled with abundant food that before my eyes arises the richness of the evangelical benediction and the image of the people whom Christ fed with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, himself the true bread and fish of the living water. Interesting. Finally, there is the association of the fish with Jesus outside of that in connection with the communal meal. In the second into the third centuries, Christians began to abbreviate the title of Jesus by using the first letter of each of his designations in Greek. In English, it stands for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, and in Greek is Jesus Christos, right? Theouias, soteria. So with each Greek letter, iota, chi, theta, upsilon, sigma, spelling out ichthus, of course, when the letters are all placed side by side, it does spell the Greek word fish, because ichthus means fish. And so we have yet another association with Christ in the form of an acrostic symbolism. Tertullian notes in his work on baptism, he says, but we little fish, according to our fish, ichthus, Jesus Christ, are born in the water, nor are we saved in any other manner than by remaining in the water. What is curious is that even though Tertullian is writing in Latin, he makes certain the word fish is written in Greek, making sure the readers know that it is in the Greek spelling of the word fish that the symbolism of Jesus is encoded. The acrostic is also spelled out in the later 2nd century in the 8th book of the Christian Sublime Oracles, with a poem with each line beginning with one of the letters in Greek. In addition, a second acrostic follows, spelling out the word cross. This connection with the acrostic title of Jesus is the most popular form of interpretation for modern versions of the symbol today. So you have that. Now, another symbol is that of the dove. And naturally, because of references that when Jesus was baptized, the Holy Spirit descended upon his head like or as a dove. So it is common to associate the dove with the third member of the Trinity. In the Odes of Solomon, written between 80 to 120 CE in Syriac, and so part of the Semitic Christianity, the dove, at the instance of Christ's baptism, is transformed into the metaphor for the Spirit as feminine, in essence, asserting, quote, so this is quoting from the Odes of Solomon from 80 to 120. It says as follows. It says, the dove fluttered over the head of our Lord Messiah because he was her head, and she sang over him, and her voice was heard. As the wings of doves over their nestlings, and the mouths of their nestlings toward their mouths, so also are the wings of the Spirit over my heart. My heart continually refreshes itself and leaps for joy, like the babe who leaps for joy in his mother's womb. Unquote. In fact, this dove, as the incarnated Holy Spirit, is presented as Jesus's mother. It says, the Spirit brought me forth before the Lord's face, and because I was the Son of Man, I was named the Light, the Son of God. Now, whoa, so we are going somewhere. So with this said, the majority of the images of the dove appear accompanied by Greek or Latin inscriptions that say in peace. Statistically, by simply focusing upon the Latin instances of this epigraphic evidence, in pos, it appears 45 times when the dove is by itself, while 37 of the times it is accompanied by the inscription in peace. In the times when the dove appears with an olive branch in its mouth or a tree, it is without in peace 21 times, and with in peace 30 times. In instance when the dove appears with a Christogram, while 70 times it is alone, 24 times it is with the inscription. As with other symbols, including the Orontes, 16 times it is without the in peace, and 50 times it is accompanied by it. The evidence from the Latin instances of in peace alone demonstrate that the dove was, guess what, associated with peace. How about that demonstrating something beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Okay, after examining the dove symbol during the times of persecution, as compared to the dove during the times following the advent of peace, as decreed by Constantine, which of course is all religions of the Roman Empire, it becomes obvious that the application of how this peace is understood is slightly altered. For in the days of persecution, the dove is often shown within the context of strife or struggle. For instance, the dove is sometimes situated near scenes of the Great Flood, with Noah's Ark nearby, in depictions of three young men about to be thrown into the fiery furnace by the Babylonians, or in the scene of Daniel in the lion's den. Equivalently, these are primary instances of persecution and deliverance, with a dove representing the hope for a peace from these conflicts. The dove is also viewed from the perspective of the community, desiring peace from the general persecution against Christians as a whole. Following Constantine in the 4th century, the dove comes to represent not so much peace from persecution, but peace of the soul, personal peace. It is an individual peace rather than a collective peace for the community. And that's an important notation to make. The first one is during persecutions, let's have peace. Now it's meant for the individual. Two anthropomorphic symbols exist in early Christian era. One of the Good Shepherd, you saw a few examples of that, and the other, the Orontes figure. Many of us will easily recognize the Good Shepherd, even from modern depictions, with the familiar details of a sheep straddled over the shoulders of the shepherd and perhaps even holding a staff. But unlike our contemporary representations, the Good Shepherd was not overtly that of Jesus at first, and you saw that. In fact, it was not until after the peace was achieved in the 4th century that the Good Shepherd was revealed as Jesus Christ. And before this time, this symbol is not depicted in biblical narrative scenes, but stands either on its own or with other symbols. That should be something to remember. This is not to say that the Good Shepherd does not resemble other figures, because in reference to Greco-Roman art, especially funerary art, the Good Shepherd in strictly Christian associations looks much like the god Orpheus. We saw how many times Orpheus appears with the Good Shepherd or close to it. Orpheus, of course, is the god of music and the central figure of the mystery cult known as Orphism, a belief system stressing a dualism between the titanic evil flesh, which is connected to the material realm, and the Dionysian good spirit, which is connected to the Olympian realms, and once realized can lead to the salvation of the unique individual soul. Orpheus is often found on pagan tombs in bucolic settings with animals, especially sheep, about him, and typically playing the lyre with milk pails nearby. Likewise, the Good Shepherd in Christian contexts is also surrounded by sheep, with a backdrop pregnant with natural beauty, and often found with the very same lyre as well as other musical instruments. Sometimes even the familiar milk pails of Orpheus are nearby the image of the Good Shepherd, like the Good Shepherd discovered in the early Christian house church at Dura Europos in Syria. Maybe it was a matter of simple coincidence, or the employing of some of the same artists as the pagans. But the connection is undeniable, at least artistically. The pagan Orpheus was connected to the idea of humanius, of caring for others. Perhaps the Good Shepherd was at first meant to represent the symbolic idea from the surrounding culture, the idea of promoting a caring community both in life and to those who pass on in death, with hopes of paradise to come. In this analogy, Christians are still viewed as the sheep being tended by the Good Shepherd. Furthermore, because of the majority of the images of the Good Shepherd are within the context of funerary art. Scholars like Queston have suggested that the figure is actually a psychopappus, a guardian of dead souls, with the intended mission to fight against the forces of evil, especially demons on the journey to the hereafter. Now, one of the most mysterious and controversial of early Christian images happens to be the Orontes figures, which is basically a veiled female representation with arms raised up in the air and often wearing elaborate robes. One curious aspect of the Orontes figure is the fact that the female Orontes figures often replace male characters in various biblical scenes depicted within the catacombs, as well as the ancient house churches and even on tombs. For example, in the story of Noah and the ark, the character of Noah, sometimes the very place where Noah should be, is replaced with a female Orontes figure. In some of the depictions of the story of Jonah and the whale, or the sea monster, ketos in Greek, Jonah stands in the boat, but he is also sometimes replaced by the female Orontes figure with arms raised. In the story of Daniel in the lion's den, it is not always the Daniel there, but he is standing. Who's standing in this place before the lions is again the raised arm female symbol, the Orontes figure. As for the young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, facing the fiery furnace, even they are often replaced by female Orontes figures. What is going on? Why are they replacing these figures with these male figures with these female Orontes figures? We find many other famous biblical figures replaced by such Orontes figures, most notably Abraham and Isaac. Yet even Lazarus is occasionally represented as a female Orontes figure. Curiously, still, according to Graydon Snyder, in the Christian culture that emerged about 180 CE, no human symbol occurs more frequently and is more vital than this female figure with lifted arms, even over that of the Good Shepherd. So far, 153 have been discovered in the catacombs of Rome alone. That's quite a few. So, what is the Orontes figure? You can imagine the theories for identity definitely do vary. For some scholars, the Orontes figure is a symbol of deliverance. For as you may note from the example above, many of these biblical characters were in the midst of persecution or danger and were suddenly and miraculously saved from their fate by God. Sometimes the deliverance is not only for themselves within their particular stories, but for those upon whose tombs they happen to be representing. For instance, in the catacombs, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, the three children in the fiery furnace, and Daniel in the lion's den are pictured asking the Lord to deliver the soul of those interred behind their images. The Orontes images take the place of these biblical characters or acting as intercessors for the recently deceased Christians too. Excuse me. Another possible meaning for the Orontes figure could be in regard to prayer. As obvious, the Orontes figure, so common in catacomb art, consistently has her arms raised. We must remember that in antiquity, the custom was that one raised their arms in prayer, that they prayed to their gods, their god or their deity, with outstretched arms reaching towards the sky. This is in paganism too. And this is from where we received the word orans, meaning one who prays. Both Gentiles and Jews prayed in this manner. Even in pagan art, the praying figures raised their arms in the same manner. One image upon an arched recess for a tomb in Ostia Cemetery shows an Orontes figure interceding for the Christian interred below, declaring Victoria Virgini. Of course, there exist other theories too, most notably presented by Wilpert, who believes the Orontes figure should be regarded as the symbol of the deceased soul in heaven, vigilantly interceding through prayer for those they knew upon earth. The spirit in Hebrew is always feminine, and this feminine meaning may have crossed over into the Greek context, or while it is still neuter grammatically, still it still retains a feminine designation in Greco-Roman art. Strong proof of this evidence arise from an ancient lead medal depicting the martyr Saint Lawrence, who is being tortured to death. The symbol of his departing soul is represented by a female orans. Also, often early Christian art literature, the soul is represented as a female virgin, pure and holy before God. For instance, souls are depicted as virgins in the Acts of Saint Cecilia, which we, of course, we went into, where they are shown as leaving the body. The text reads as vidit egredentes animas eroem de corporeis quasi virginias de thermo. A further ancient Christian text with the same virgin imagery for the soul is found in the Acts of St. Peter and Marcellinus. As mentioned, the Orontes figure was also in Greek and Roman art, and it is possible that the symbol within this context is transferable over to a Christian context. We find the female Orontes figure with raised arms on the obverse of many Roman coins dating from the time of the Emperor Trajan, so around 98 CE on, and ending around the time of Maximian. When the Orontes figure appears on these coins, it is often with the inscription saying pietas. And so we can derive from this evidence that most commoners who saw these coins equated this image with the idea of piety. The emperor used it in connection with their family's piety, so perhaps it is connected with the piety towards the new family of Christians. Still, I believe the prayer and soul connections have more merit in consideration of the early Christian literature. Yet, with the advent of the age of Constantine and the official recognition of the church, this Orontes figure mysteriously disappears. During this new age, the image of the male good shepherd easily beats the female Orontes figure and becomes the most recognized symbol besides one other. And of course, that is of the cross, which was almost non existent in early Christian art. But it would become, after this time, the most prominent symbol of the days of peace. Isn't it curious that during times of persecution, the cross, seemingly so suitable to this period of suffering, was hardly to be seen in visual depictions? And yet, when peace reigned after Constantine, the cross would then become one of the most powerful Christian symbols of all. And so, this idea as well, crucifixion was a common way of taking care of Christians who were non-citizens. So you can see why would they have a veneration of a torture implement. Oh, of course, then again, maybe the anchor is a pseudo cross. Yes, we have in narratives ideas that the cross is important in the theological sense, but when it comes to the image itself, I'm sorry, it's non-existent in the catacombs all the way until we get to the 320s. And I think that is interesting because today the cross is everywhere to be seen. Well, it is beyond question that when Constantine the Great built St. Peter's over the site of Peter's tomb, the archaeological evidence is not as overwhelming. According to tradition, Peter was martyred around 64 CE at the Circus of Nero, that is located along the Vatican Hill. Next to the circus, an extensive pagan necropolis reached to the hill beyond. Excavations undertaken from 1939 to 1951 revealed that this necropolis beneath St. Peter's was one of the wealthiest in terms of mausoleums and fine funerary monuments. And of course, I have been down here, down there underneath the Vatican there, to actually see some of these, which is pretty amazing. Um, Now, what happens here? The majority of the tombs were pagan, but some Christian ones were amongst them. For instance, the image of Christ Helios is represented. And I know it's not going to turn out, but I just can't resist. Here is the image of Christ Helios. And so it's Jesus, it's Christ as connected to the Son. Oh, I guess it did turn out. That's pretty cool. All right. So you have that, right? Now, you also have, of course, Jonah being cast from the boat. Um, Now, it is said that, of course, there are two inscriptions, a petition to Christ and another petition to St. Peter. So it is said that St. Peter was buried here. I'm going to about to give a big mystery and to give an answer to it. That will be a kind of it'll rock the boat a little bit. In the mid first century, a vacant field followed the necropolis, and here and there the poor were buried, sometimes with the remains deposited in a simple jar or placed under terracotta slabs. Between 100 and 150, burials began to appear in the area just below where the crypt of St. Peter is now located. Around 160 CE, there is a small shrine was constructed that will later be considered St. Peter's tomb, around upon which, of course, the Vatican will be built. Around 200 CE, a certain presbyter named Gaius wrote as follows. He says, again, the date is 200 CE. He says, I can show you the trophies of the apostles. For if you will go to the Vatican or to the Ostian Way, you will find the trophies of those who founded this church. So, and so as we discussed before, of course, you have tombs along the Ostian Way. One of the tombs was associated with the Apostle Paul. So the only one left over is the Apostle Peter at the Vatican. Most likely, the Tropea of Peter was the shrine that is located here. And of course, once again, we have to remember, I want to mention this, you have to remember that there was a circus of Nero that is approximately where the Vatican Square is today. And so what happens is that it is said that Peter was killed. He was crucified upside down by Nero in this particular stadium. And so what will happen is right behind the stadium, there was some land where they would bury those who were executed. And so this is the location of where they say St. Peter's tomb was located. So it does make sense from a historical perspective that St. Peter would be buried where he is at under St. Peter's today. But we're not done yet. What happens is, once standing here, there was a shrine that's 1.34 meters high and 1.78 meters wide. A portion of the wall actually remains today. Eventually, St. Peter's will be built around this little shrine. But it is curious that unlike other famous apostles and saints, not many Christian burials surrounded that man, often considered the first pope by Catholics. The answer to this mystery has been discovered. Peter's body was moved at a certain point during the persecutions to another location to avoid desecration. And that place was at a triclea along the Via Appia. While in the modern perception, the Church of St. Peter's at the Vatican is regarded as the monumental epitome of Peter's martyrdom and his memory. This is not always the case, for another site captured the attention of millions of pilgrims throughout the centuries, even into the medieval era, and that is the Church of San Sebastiano that we just saw along the Via Appia. In fact, San Sebastiano was often referred to as simply the Memoria Apostolorum, the memory of the apostles. If you know Latin, you'll immediately realize that this is a reference to the apostles' memory. It is in the plural. For both Peter and Paul were remembered here. In a 4th century calendar of festivals known as the Deposito Martyrium, June 29th was established for the celebration of both Peter and Paul at the location where San Sebastiano now stands. The calendar does read Petri in Catacombs et Pauli Ostensa, Tusco et Basso Concilibus. Now, as typical for the calendar and all such calendars of this sort, the martyrdom date is provided after the reference. But in this case, rather than citing the two consuls from 64 CE, you look at this and it's Tusco and Basso who are described as the consuls. It mentions the two consuls who are in office not in 64 CE, but the ones who are in office in the year 258 CE. How can this be? Why this date? Obviously, no Christian then or now, or even scholar believes this is the date for Peter's martyrdom. No, something else is commemorated by this date. The answer may come as a surprise. It appears that while Peter was buried at the Vatican and Paul at another location along the Via Sacra, along or at least commemorated at these two locations by 200 CE, the two were moved during the time of severe persecution in the middle of the 3rd century to prevent authorities or anyone desecrating their bones. Then, after the time of persecution, the remains of Peter and Paul were eventually returned to their original locations. Maybe. As for the archaeological evidence of the heightened sanctity of this locality in reference to Peter and Paul, excavations revealed that sometime before 240, a cella was built over a mausolea, revealing that this location was special in some way and was a place that was deemed worthy of honor. Then around 250, a large triclea was added east of the cella with 3 benches sitting along its 3 walls. The walls were decorated with frescoes presenting life in paradise as a garden with hedges and flowering vegetation, including rose bushes, and frequented by birds and a lamb. The east wall of the triclea is covered with 3rd and early 4th century graffiti. Here, the story is finally told by those who journeyed here and who scratched their personal marks upon the shrine. While a few only leave their names behind, many of them are prayers for direct intercession in their lives or for the lives of others they know directly to both the apostles Peter and Paul. For instance, one declares, Paul and Peter pray for Victor. Apollet Petre petite pro Victoria. While another says, Paul, Peter pray for Erote, intercede. This is a demonstration from the archaeological record that by the second half of the 3rd century, there was not only an act of devotion to the apostles and martyrs, but they were already believed to have the power of intercession through the proximity of their very physical remains. Petitions were now being made. This belief was motivated by many pilgrims to come here with hopes of finding help through their petitions. Their power, energy connected to these bones. But the graffiti reveals another custom going on in association with the apostles at the triclea, beyond that of simple petitions for interceding to their needs, with inscription after inscription mentioning a refrigerium like a refrigerator. For instance, one asserts Peter and Paul, Tomius Collius, made this refrigerium. That's interesting. And so another states 13 days before the calendar of April, a refrigerium was held. Parthenius in God and all of us in God. A few of these are in Greek, one translated as Peter and Paul protect your servants, Holy Spirits protect a refrigerium. From what we can gain from the inscriptions, as well as from Greek and Roman culture in general, these refrigeria refer to meals eaten either for or symbolically with the dead. Traditionally, Romans celebrated a refrigeria over a deceased family member, often with other family members, on the day of their death, the 9th day after their funeral, and then upon a yearly anniversary after their death. This was an occasion for reflection of the person who died, of celebrating life, and an excuse to have, well, a picnic. The word refrigerium literally means refreshment and can also be connected to the Roman idea of refreshing or feeding the dead. Here at the Triclea, the apostles have become the members of a new Christian family, and so many of them arrived here with a meal, sometimes wine and bread, and perhaps even fruits and fish, and sat along with Peter and Paul. After their agape meal and dedication to Peter and Paul, Christians sometimes made prayers and petitions to the apostles and even asked them to pray for their own now deceased family members. So we're looking at the beginning of the cult of the martyrs. Here it's starting. You seeing it? Yes, in a big way. So what happens here is that while refrigeriums were reserved, as I said before, for family members, these Christians had lost their families, so they're forming a new Christian family. And so what will happen is the top tiered fathers, so to speak, will be the apostles themselves. And so they'll take that custom from a pagan context and then transfer it over to a Christian one. As for the earlier and later resting places of the Apostle Paul, apparently before uh, he ended up at the Triclea in the middle of the third century, this 13th apostle was already venerated at his own unique site outside of the parameters of Rome. At least as early as 200 CE, there was a cella memoria, which was dedicated to the Apostle Paul along the Via Ostia near the Catacombs of Commodea. According to the Liber Pontificalis, the Emperor Constantine transformed this site into a grand church that soon became known as St. Paul outside the walls. Because the sanctuary was located just outside the walls surrounding Rome, built by the Emperor Aurelius, that's how it got its name. The church itself was consecrated by Stephen the First in 324. In 386, the Emperor Theodosius dedicated an even greater and ornate basilica filled with elaborate mosaics, eventually 36 in all, displaying the life of the Apostle Paul. By the 5th century, the basilica became dedicated to the saints Taurenius and Heraclius, two martyrs from Ostia, and received the additional name Basilica Trium Divinorum. Unfortunately, as a result of negligence by a worker attempting to repair a lead roof, the Grand Basilica caught on fire in 1823, and the majority of the structure was destroyed, with the exception of the arch above the altar and part of the apse. While the basilica was immediately rebuilt, much of the ancient ambience of that structure was lost that day. So, that's all well and good, one might say. But a memorial is just a memorial. Where's the body? Where exactly is Paul buried? Various accounts inform us that the actual tomb of the Apostle Paul was once quite visible to all the church, built by Theodosius in the 4th century. So we do know then that the body, or possibly the body, was returned from San Sebastiano, where it was temporarily interred because of the persecutions. And during this period of peace, it does end up at St. Paul outside the walls. But let's keep on going. So what happens is that yet it wasn't long until it was decided that his body should rest deep down within the crypt instead. When the fire destroyed the church in 1823, rather than take the time to restore this ancient crypt, the chamber was hastily filled in with dirt in order to support the new papal altar. Uh, a certain Giorgio Filippi, the Vatican archaeologist in charge of the project of St. Paul's outside the walls Basilica, asserts, this is, of course, 1999, that we were always certain that the tomb had to be there beneath the papal altar. But he knew that seeing was believing. In fact, many pilgrims, hoping to find the burial spot of the Apostle Paul, were very disappointed to encounter just an elaborately reconstructed church with no sign of tomb whatsoever. But eventually, they did investigations, the altar area in the year 2002, declaring that his objective was to bring the remains of the tomb back to light for devotional reasons so that it could be venerated and visible. And the tomb of the Apostle Paul was indeed discovered buried about 2 feet below the floor. According to Cardinal Andrea Cordero Lanza, the head of the basilica, the coffin was buried under another part of the building away from the central altar. This sarcophagus, covered by two large slabs of marble, bears the following Latin inscription. It says, Paul, Apostle, Martyr. Now, listen up. The sarcophagus itself dates back to around 390 CE, and it is marked with many holes through which pilgrims once pushed cloths and other materials in order to touch the bones of the Apostle Paul, popularly believed to cure the sick and to cast out demons. We saw this, of course, in Acts 19, 11 through 12 at Ephesus, where they're taking handkerchiefs from the Apostle Paul, and it was believed to have special powers in and of itself. That's an important moment when it comes to the cult of relics. Because here's Paul, he is going about Ephesus, and people are taking without his will, right? He's not decided upon that. They're supposedly taking these pieces of cloth and they're laying it on others, and it's performing miracles. And so the idea that the material in and of itself has miraculous powers, and they will use that to substantiate this claim. And so what happens is, you can see where we're going with this, is that this contributes to the cult of the relics, that the bones themselves have a special power intrinsically within them. So they just get those cloths and they touch the bones of the Apostle Paul, much like the cloths that connected to the Apostle Paul in Ephesus. They take away from it, it could perform miracles. So we're watching the development again of the cult of relics. So while the sarcophagus remains unopened, it is most likely the tomb of Paul. As you can see here, a cult venerating the relics of the apostle continued to gain popular support amongst Christians and seemed to even increase during times of persecution in the middle of the late 3rd century, with increasingly more elaborate structures constructed around and over the sites in order to demonstrate due devotion and to accommodate increased pilgrim traffic. Eventually, mighty pilgrimage churches rose over their tombs. St. Peter's, St. Paul outside the walls, and San Sebastiano. Furthermore, gradually the actual physical remains of the apostles become viewed as imbued with holiness and power, and through the medium of their relics, the actual apostles themselves were reachable in heaven above and able to hear their prayers as well as their petitions. But this veneration was not reserved for the apostles alone, but for anyone who was martyred for the faith, became revered as saints, and received the same form of devotion. And so, yes, the cult of the saints, which is the other half of this talk, we're right in the middle of it, has begun. Beyond the apostles, one of the earliest records we have for the veneration of saints in Christian writings is Polycarp, who, as a disciple of John, was martyred as an old man in Smyrna around 155 CE. The story of his death was recorded in an anonymous Greek work known as the Martyrdom of Polycarp. This work describes the actual bones of Polycarp as, quote, dearer to us than precious stones and finer than gold, which we buried in a fitting spot, unquote. In memory of his witness, the Church of Smyrna met every year to celebrate, quote, celebrate the anniversary day of his martyrdom, unquote, both as a memorial for those who have already fought the contest, and it continues, and for the training and preparation for those who will do so one day. So already Polycarp appears to be another saint that's connected to this cult of relics. After Polycarp, one of the earliest saints venerated who were not apostles were two women by the name of Perpetua and Felicitas. While their bodies were buried at Carthage, their feast day, March 7th, quickly spread all over the Roman world and beyond Africa, and eventually They were added to the official Christian calendar of martyrs in Rome. In the early 4th century, what happened is after the Peace of Constantine, a grand basilica was erected over the tomb in Carthage, known as the Basilica Majorum. The idea of going to a particular place where a special dedication was erected in memory of a great person who was now deceased, with hopes that through petitions presented directly to them, that person at their shrine could connect to heaven itself, may not be so unusual in the ancient world. What? What? Wait, follow me. Wait. Going to a particular place, yeah, in dedication to the memory of a great person, who had died, right? In hopes that going to that place through petitions, that you, at that shrine, that you could actually contact that person, in essence, is not unusual. I know we connect these ideas with Christianity. And if you hadn't noticed, slowly but surely, as this talk is going on, there is a gradual unfolding. Let's unfold a little bit further. What happens here is Greek and Roman heroes were venerated by special monuments known as heroons. Especially, guess who? Hercules, as well as other great leaders and founders of cities, such as Androclus at Ephesus, and Philip of Macedonia at Philippi, and his, of course, obviously Alexander the Great, worshipped as a hero virtually everywhere. A heroon is defined as any altar, sacred space, shrine, or temple dedicated to the cult of a hero. So what's happening is the heroon cult of the hero will now be transferred over to the martyr cult of Christianity. It's all the same. Many of these heroons are anonymous, with the names of the hero tied to the locality of these heroes long forgotten. The earliest example of a heroon in Greece arises from a sacred district at Eretria and Euboea, alongside the west gate of the city. This is from the 7th century BCE. Right from the beginning, heroons were found in association with what the worshiper believed were the actual bones of their hero, although later there will be cases where the heroon was simply a monument to the hero's memory. Eventually, these heroes were depicted as placed upon various thrones. Typically, they have a snake wrapped around their arms, revealing that they live again, but in an underground or chthonic case. By the 6th century BCE, these heroes now reclined upon banquet couches located in various public places, as it can be discerned from the fact that they hold a drinking horn known as the rhyton and a libation bowl known as a phele. The expectation was that they were to receive special offerings as well as dedications to refresh their spirits, refrigerium, as the individual makes their requests. As they're making requests at places of dead heroes. This is ancient Greco-Roman beliefs. As depicted, offerings range anything from, guess what? Wine. Yeah. And to more tangible foods like bread, eggs, and fruit. In these sacred places dedicated to these heroes and often directly before their images, archaeologists have found votive offerings, especially oil lamps, inscribed with dedications in expectation to receive something back. Interestingly enough, we will find those very same oil lamps in front of these places dedicated to the martyrs, to the saints, for this very same purpose, and oftentimes with inscriptions upon it. A few of these simply state to the hero, while others mention them by name, such as Hercules, Perseus, and Achilles. As to be expected, one discovered in Mycenae was dedicated to Helen, right? Helena Troy, while another from Sparta was dedicated to Menelaus. Whether sitting upon a throne or reclining upon a couch, the hero was shown as alive, as ever present, and not deceased. The hero could receive offerings, be persuaded with gifts, listen to requests, petition on behalf of the worshippers to the gods, and as noted, actually eat and drink. While the heroes occupied the space of their harems, they were also occupying the realm of the dead, and so formed a link between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead, between humanity and the underworld gods. Because their bones were considered alive, they became valuable relics. The Greek historian Herodotus notes that one time the Spartans desired to gain power of the nearby city known as Tegea. So they stole the bones of their hero Orestes and brought them to Sparta, and so by this action believe Orestes was now fighting on the side of the Spartans and were able to defeat Tegea, now stripped of their heroic advocate. The actual bones of Theseus, the epic hero of Athens, were most especially considered sacred, as Plutarch notes. At the Battle of Marathon, many of the soldiers believed they saw Theseus running ahead of them against the Persians. The Oracle of Delphi commanded the Athenians to bring home the bones of Theseus and give them an honorable burial in the city. But at that time, the hostile inhabitants of Sicros made it impossible even to find where the old bones might be. When Cimon captured Sicros many years later, he saw an eagle clawing at the ground, and suddenly it came into his mind to dig there and search for the bones of Theseus. He found there a coffin of a man, more than ordinary size, and a bronze spearhead and sword. Cimon loaded these on board his ship and transported it back to Athens. The Athenians, greatly delighted, went out to meet and receive these relics with splendid processions and sacrifices, as if their founder had returned alive. They buried him in the middle of Athens, where his tomb became a sanctuary for slaves and poor people who ran from men of power, in memory that Theseus was a protector of the weak and always helped the people in trouble who fled to him. And guess what? That same kind of ceremony was repeated over and over and over again within the city known as Constantinople, as various emperors brought in the relics from all over the eastern part of the empire, and they would have a great procession, very similar to this, but for these Christian saints with the same kind of celebration. Again, it is still ancient religion. By the 5th century BCE, this hero cult began to mix a bit with the ancestral cult, so that some of the heroes venerated at various harems were those connected to worshippers by blood. The worship of heroes also extended to city founders as well as local great warriors and poets and athletes. Um, in the same century, with the rise of the power of the Greek city states, the hero cult merged with the ruler cult, so that political leaders were revered as heroes with semi divine status after they passed. Such devotion to local heroes of the city state helped bolster local patriotism. During the 4th century BCE, philosophers were added to that list of those who were considered heroes and worthy of receiving veneration at their very own harems, inclusive of Pythagoras, he had his own harem, Plato, and Epicurus. Meanwhile, rulers and kings were now viewed as potential heroes as well. One of the greatest harems built in this century was dedicated to King Mausolus of Halicarnassus by his wife in 353, eventually giving rise to the use of the word for any grand tomb as mausoleum. Yes, that's a famous one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It turns out to be a harem. With Alexander the Great, worship of the local rulers of the city state as heroes was elevated to the worship of Hellenistic kings as heroes, who were semi divine in much the same way as the heroes of old. For instance, Alexander the Great went to the great oracle of Ammon in Egypt. He was supposed to have learned that it was Zeus and not Philip of Macedonia who was his father, hence becoming literally half god, half man, which was often a prerequisite for heroes of old. A hero of old has to be half God and half man, or in the case of Christianity, having the Spirit of God within them, right? So, because of his precedent, the Hellenistic kingdoms of the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, the Attalids, all had active ruler hero cults. Of course, this ruler veneration eventually formed the basis for the imperial cult of the Roman emperors. Meanwhile, the cult of heroes thrived as ever before during the early Roman Empire, many of them rising into great edifices. The Harun discovered at Seglasis in southern Turkey from the time of Augustus was one such example, made of cut ashlar stones, standing 14 meters high and built directly on the hillside. This sacred complex, dedicated to yet an unidentified citizen of the city, was divided into three sections. First, a podium in front, then next, a frieze behind the podium higher up in elevation along the hill featuring images of dancing girls, and finally a temple behind it featuring Corinthian columns and a small cella. Another grand hero was the famous Library of Celsus at Ephesus in the early 2nd century. Through the agency of special offerings given at the Haruns, petitions were believed, heard by those great heroes, and carried directly over to the gods themselves. The hero then was viewed as the intercessor in very much the same way as the later saints. And it's not surprising that some of the venerated martyr shrines were built on the exact foundations or near an earlier Harun that was dedicated to a hero. It just replaced one for the other. The Harun discovered, for example, at the city of Philippi is a good example of this phenomenon. Just east of Philippi's Agora, a rectangular Macedonian Harun was built, dedicated to a prominent hero whose identity unfortunately has been lost. The Harun was well constructed and shaped and came complete with a three-stepped crepice foundation, emphasizing the importance of the individual honored here. The burial chamber was capped by a temple-shaped structure above the Hellenistic above. Surrounding the monument Harun was a courtyard enclosed by a wall, marking off the site as sacred. However, soon after the Edict of Milan in 313, a church was built within this courtyard, complete with a narthex, a nave, and a sanctuary, and having a mosaic floor displaying birds flying around a fruit-bearing tree, an obvious reference, of course, to paradise. An inscription found on this level states, Bishop Porphyrius made the embroidery of Paul's basilica in Christ, who was the bishop of Philippi, who signed off on the Council of Serdica in 342. At this point, the pagan Harun and the Christian church were actually side by side, coexisting together. Still, above this three-part church in the courtyard was later built another church, probably after the edicts of Theodosius prohibiting paganism in 391-392. This one, a quite grandiose octagonal-shaped structure next to a baptistry. The building was now surrounded with guest houses intended to accommodate pilgrims. As for the Harun, the Hellenistic temple-shaped structure above it, both were now converted to a Christian use and continued up into the 6th century. The tomb was now repurposed to accommodate a Christian purpose with bronze coins offered as votives in the upper structure. But there's more, for now pilgrims left their graffiti on the walls of the octagon in prayer, one reading, Lord, help your servant, Peter. Some claim that this tomb was really dedicated to the Apostle Paul, supporting the theory that Paul died in Philippi, not Rome. This is another interesting part of early Christian beliefs. And so perhaps some of his relics were placed in this tomb, but this went from a place of Harun to a place dedicated to a saint. During the reign of Constantine, his cousin Gallus literally carried the bones of Saint Babius to the garden city of Daphne near Antioch for the sole purpose of replacing from the oracle of Apollo there with a saintly presence. So now again, we're having a replacement here. Yet there is one remarkable difference in the last couple pages. Last remarkable difference, and that is while the possessions of heroes were often venerated and put on display at the Harun or local temple, the actual physical remains, while believed in some cases to have power, did not have the same understanding of power that we find through the Christian innovation. Because the Christians believe in the resurrection of the flesh. You didn't have that idea. Of course, you have this concept of the actual blood and flesh of Christ, obviously connected to the bread and the wine in the Eucharist. So the bones of the heroes were tangibly considered sacred and were venerated. But what happens here, right, is that still uh, in Christianity there's a little difference. It is true. So what happens is that for Christians, the bones of the saints and our martyrs literally become physical conduits when refreshed through libations and other offerings, inclusive of sacred meals, in a sense, uh, being bestowed with proactive healing powers and supernatural energies that charge it up so it can be used in and of themselves as vehicles of the divine. So only Christian saintly bones, for the most part, were deemed to operate in this way. It is perhaps an irony that, in this sense, these changed Christian bones were in many ways similar to Greco Roman magical amulets and images related to the gods. For many pagans, while the soul did resurrect or exist after death in some form, the body was left behind to decay, regardless of their role in libations and offerings at the graveside or Harun. Plutarch mentions one of the exceptions to this rule, stating that some Romans did believe Romulus, the founder of king of Rome, became a god, body and all, through what was defined as apotheosis. But the author did not agree. He said this apotheosis involving a literal resurrection of the flesh. He viewed this as the operations of a primitive mind, that this is not possible. So there is no physical resurrection. Because Christ was believed to have reanimated his actual flesh and blood upon his resurrection, and because it was held by many Christians that they too would go through this process of their dead flesh becoming alive again, it became a foregone conclusion that those who were especially holy, the saints, would, in a spiritual sense, go through a kind of transformation in anticipation to this resurrection. Concerning this transformation of relics to saints, Gregory of Nyssa notes in the 4th century that those who behold them embrace them, as it were, the living body in full flower. They bring eye, mouth, ear, all the senses into play, and then, shedding tears of reverence and passion, they address to the martyrs their prayers of intercession as if he were present. So he had this idea that is more of a literal sense. Now, here's the situation. How did the Greeks and Romans view this added meaning to their heroes, to this? Because remember, you think that the Greeks and Romans didn't notice that the Harun, that the whole practice of revering the heroes. I mean, obviously they noticed that it's been repurposed and being used for the saints, for the martyrs. So what was their views? Well, here it is. We do have some people saying so. Of course, pagans reached. We're kind of curious about why, even though it's important, these shrines are important, why the Christians were so preoccupied with death. Julian the Apostate, or Julian the Great, depending on your perspective, who's a Roman emperor that follows Constantius, uh, says as follows. He says, Christians, he says, you keep adding many corpses, newly dead, to the corpses of long ago. You have filled the whole world with tombs and sepulchres. So the criticism of these Greek and Romans is the fact that you're too preoccupied in the morbidity of this of the cult of relics. We have the cult of relics, but we don't go to the degree that you do. Eunapius, who was a historian, he lived from 347 to 420. He writes as follows concerning this. He says, concerning Christians, he said, for they collected the bones and skulls of criminals who had been put to death for numerous crimes, made them out to be gods, and thought that they became better by defiling themselves at their graves. Martyrs, the dead men were called, and ministers of sort and ambassadors with the gods to carry men's prayers. So he's saying these are criminals. Obviously, they were executed, but that's for the reason of Christianity was perceived as being not patriotic. But for both Jews and Christians, a literal bodily resurrection of the body was indeed a possibility. The division between the physical realm here and the physical realm in the hereafter could be crossed. You mean there's a physical realm in the hereafter? Well, you have a bodily resurrection. Prudentius, a Christian author of the late 4th century, writes as follows. He says, excuse me, but should the fiery essence of the soul think on its high origin and cast aside the numbing stain of life, then it will carry with it too the flesh in which it is lodged and bear it also to the stars. So we're talking a literal resurrection of the flesh. Prudentius. For the Christian, these relics could heal the possessed. They have special power. Jerome, who translated the Latin Vulgate, he wrote on the impression of a certain Paula when she encountered the tombs of the prophets in the Holy Land. And she says as follows, he says as follows, recording her experience. He says, she shuddered at the sight of so many marvelous happenings, for there she was met by the noise of demons roaring at various torments. And before the tombs of the saints, she saw men howling like wolves, roaring like lions, hissing like snakes, billowing like bulls. Some tossed their heads to touch the earth by arching their bodies backwards. Women hung upside down in midair, yet their skirts did not fall down over their heads. Just unquote. So you have these ideas that what's known as the potentia, the power of these martyrs' bones, are able to be able to do an exorcism. It's able to take away possession by evil spirits. So we see this in lots of places, both in East and West, where relics are connected to the idea of getting rid of any bad spirits you may have. Gregory of Tours said that there should be no doubt, he says, that the saints are present at their own tomb. So you do have this merging of the cult of the hero with the cult of the saint and martyr, with an interesting Christian twist in connection to the power of the resurrected flesh. And so it will be viewed that these bones connect literally to the saints, literally to the martyrs, and their power flows through them, and miracles can be accounted through these divine portals. And so we've covered quite a bit. We covered, I believe you're going to leave with a very firm understanding of not only what the catacombs were all about, but how they relate very much to the cult of the saints. So thank you so much for joining in. We've kind of covered quite a bit, and have a great day.